Hello, it is Foundation Friday, March 25th, 2022. Steve Sipress here with another in our multi-part series on the fantastic foundational book, The Magic of Thinking Big by Dr. David J. Schwartz. And today we are at the end of the chapter, You Are What You Think You Are, kind of the centerpiece to the entire book, The Magic of Thinking Big. Dr. Schwartz starts off the what do you call this? The conclusion, the overview, the recap of the chapter with the title, Upgrade Your Thinking. That's what the whole book is all about. You upgrade your thinking. When I first read this book, I upgraded my thinking. That upgraded my results, my happiness, my success, my results in business and personal life and everything. And so highly recommend, as always, you get yourself a copy of this book, The Magic of Thinking Big, and not just tune in every week for little bite-sized pieces of it. At the end of this chapter, I won't go over the whole thing because we just went over the whole chapters. It's just simply the recap at the end. Upgrading your thinking upgrades your actions, and this produces success. Simple enough. So here's a checklist of how am I thinking in a certain situation and what questions to ask myself. And he gives 9 different situations: when I worry, when I have an idea about my appearance, my language, what I read, conversations, when I lose my temper, my jokes, my job, my business. Gives questions to ask yourself. I'm just going to go over question number 1. Was the most powerful part of this entire book when I first read it, was when I, or maybe it was, not really number 1, let's say number 7, when I lose my temper. In my case, when I lose my temper, when I'm disappointed, when I have a problem with something, the question to ask is, would an important person get mad at what I'm mad at? Would an important person react this way to this situation? So I gave an example a few weeks ago, earlier in the chapter, when I talked about that I used to play a lot of very competitive sports. And in softball, once I graduated and was out of college and was no longer playing baseball, I started playing competitive softball and on very many competitive teams and competitive situations. We played in travel tournaments, getting on an airline, checking the bag with all the gear, getting off and playing in tournaments out of town. Played in the Mayor's Cup tournament in Boston, and all kinds of competitive situations. And then once in a while, I would play in a fun kind of pickup, well, maybe not pickup, but a kind of a fun tournament. I remember one in particular, a co-ed tournament on a Sunday afternoon when I was playing 6 days a week competitively. This would be another day to just get out there and have some fun. And I remember this one time while I was reading this book, there I was, shortstop. Or it wasn't while I was reading the book, it was later when I read the book I thought about. I would be out there at shortstop, and in these co-ed leagues, for better or for worse, the teams tend to put the weaker players in the weaker, quote, positions on the baseball field. And you had to have at least, I think, 3 or 4 women on the team. All these rules right now, of course, all bets are off. You can win gold medals and set records if you're a woman, as long as you are calling yourself a woman and you're not really a woman, but I digress. These were actual women competing with the men co-ed, so there are certain rules for how close the outfielders, they have to stand back a certain distance, not creep up all the way and take away all the hits from the women. So generally the 4 positions the women would play would be pitcher, catcher, right field, and second base. The right side of the plate where most players hit to the left side. So that's where you put the weaker players, and I'd be out at short. And I remember, hard hit balls out to second base, and the girl would eek and jump out of the way and yell and scream, and then she'd, miss the cutoff throw or not be able to catch the ball in the cutoff. And I'd get all upset. I'm like, oh, come on. Oh, man, I'm getting all upset. Then I read this chapter, and I learned to ask myself the question, would an important person get upset about this? And the example I gave back then, it was in the mid-'80s, was the top shortstops in the game at the time, Cal Ripken, Ozzie Smith. And I thought about it. I said, if Cal Ripken, not in the situation he's in, playing in the Major League Baseball for millions of dollars, or even back then hundreds of thousands of dollars. But if he was in this situation I'm in today, that's what Dr. Schwartz is suggesting you do. Think if Cal Ripken were playing here somewhere on some field in Boston on a Sunday afternoon in a co-ed, fun type of tournament that means nothing, and a ball was hard hit towards second base, and the second baseman said, "Eek," and she jumped out of the way, how would Cal Ripken respond? What would he think? What would he do? And I'm like, holy crap, he couldn't care less. He'd go, look, this is a ridiculous Sunday afternoon co-ed meaningless softball thing here you're just doing for fun. I actually am an important person who plays in Major League Baseball, World Series, and All-Star games, and even regular season games that are meaningful stuff. This is ridiculous. I wouldn't get upset at all. I go, whatever. Life goes on. I'm just out here to have fun. So that was my implementation of what Dr. Schwartz is sharing. His suggestion here is think, what would an important person do in your position? I remember in business also, and I would think back then to the most successful business people and entrepreneurs when I had issues in my business. And, I had somebody, a vendor that overcharged me by $50, or somebody ripped me off by a few $1,000s or whatever. I was like, man, how would the most successful entrepreneurs respond today? Today, you would ask, how would Elon Musk respond? How would Jeff Bezos respond? How would Bill Gates respond? To losing a few $1,000s, to being ripped off by a competitor for, to lose a client, to have one employee walk out, they would go, whatever. It's just $10,000. It's not a big deal. An important person, a bigger person, would see that as not a big deal. So if I want to be an important person, if I want to be more important, if I want to be a bigger person, I got to learn to respond as the bigger person would. And then guess what? Had the result, certainly in my life and other people I've shared this with, that you step into that and you step up. So that I remember, I think it was in this chapter, which means I shared it within the last few weeks, Dr. Schwartz said that only big people are only bothered by big things. Little people are bothered by little things. And I remember when I first read that, that bothered me, and I threw the book across the room and said, who you calling a little person? There you go. A very example of what Dr. Schwartz was teaching. What a little thing, a sentence in a book. And I was all bent out of shape by it, by a sentence in a book. Give me a break, right? By a ground ball that goes through the infield because the second baseman said eek and jumped out of the way, by a cutoff throw that was missed in a ridiculous, non-competitive, co-ed, fun tournament on a Sunday afternoon in a summertime in Boston. Like, who cares? Let's be bigger than that. So I highly recommend you go over these questions, you go over this chapter, and you learn, as I did, to think and act bigger in whatever situations tend to bother you, so that you think, how would a bigger person respond to this situation? It wouldn't bother him at all. It's almost always the answer. And so, in a nutshell, Dr. Schwartz finishes this chapter saying, remember 4 things to cement in your mind the question, is this the way an important person does it? Use that question to make you a bigger, more successful person. And in a nutshell, remember 4 things. Number 1, look important. It'll help you think important. Number 2, think your work is important. Think that way and you will receive mental signals on how to do your job or run your business better. Number 3, give yourself a pep talk several times daily and build a sell yourself to yourself commercial. And number 4, in all of life's situations, ask yourself, is this the way an important person thinks? And then obey the answer. How to think big, the magic of thinking big. Dr. David J. Schwartz. Go out and get yourself a copy of this book. And be back here again next Friday as I delve into Chapter 7, Manage Your Environment and Go First Class. We'll start that next Foundation Friday. Until then, I'll catch you back here again tomorrow on Social Media Saturday. Thanks for being here today. Over and out. Bye-bye.